Hello and welcome to the 12 Months to Marathon podcast with me, John Hill, the running podcast for the over 35s with Marathon Dreams. Episode number 70, a tribute episode to the widely regarded greatest of all time marathon runner, Eliud Kipchoge. So what's going on with me at the moment? Well, I am currently in a tiny little bit of limbo. I've got my own marathon coming up on the 12th of April next year, so I'll start training on the 22nd of December. I'm doing the Boston Marathon here in the UK, as I mentioned before. I've recently injured myself. I dropped a sandbag on my foot in the gym whilst training, which is the first time in 20 years that I've dropped something on my foot in the gym, so I was due one, as it were. So yeah, it's healing okay. Bit of bruising, nothing broken, I think, because I can still walk on it and things like that. So, in case you didn't know, I'm assuming you're going to know who Eliud Kipchoge is, but in case you didn't, he just did the New York Marathon, and it's funny actually how people talk about somebody like that, because it's like, oh yeah, he didn't perform at his best. I think he did a 2:14 in a long sleeve top, and he's 40. He's just turned 41, funnily enough. And I remember being first introduced to Eliud Kipchoge, I think when he broke the world record for the marathon. And then when, of course, he did the Ineos Challenge and did the sub 2-hour marathon unofficially. And one thing that always got me about Eliud Kipchoge, and one reason why I wanted to do this podcast, was because of something he said about smiling while you're running. And he always used to smile, and he recommended that everybody smile when he ran. And one thing that always got me about him, and also a lot of other elite marathoners, is when he finished the 2-hour challenge, he kept running and then smiled, and I think he might have ran over and hugged his partner. I just thought that's incredible how somebody has still got that much energy and enthusiasm after doing something like that to then go and, be able to smile, run across the finish line and hug their partner. So I wanted to do a little bit of a tribute to him, just because I think, not in the sense of necessarily the athletic endeavours per se, because I think sometimes who I'm talking to here is usually people who are probably in the first time marathon, looking to PB phase. I'm assuming that some of you may be sort of decent, performance level, marathon runners, sort of, good club runners, whatever. Very similar to myself, maybe sub 3, that sort of territory. So, but most people that listen to me are over 35, potentially want to do their first marathon or PB a subsequent one. And I think some of the principles here with Eliud will help you on that, irrespective of his particular athletic performance. Because let's be honest, and this is a sidetrack, but it's a good note to remember with all of this stuff, is when you think you're slow, or when people are calling you slow on the internet, which does happen occasionally, we are all slow compared to the people that we're talking about here. All of us. Even the fastest person I know, quote unquote, online is probably in the 2:15 to 2:20 region for a marathon. And I say no, I don't know them personally, but I know them online. They're slow compared to these people, because he did a 2:14 at the age of 14, a long sleeve top in New York. So I want to talk about his legacy. I want to reflect on his legacy, and I want to talk about really how he's done it, the mindset, the discipline, and the humility of him, because he strikes me as somebody who's very, very humble, and he likes to give back. And I think that's important. So whether or not you are in that sort of, sub 3 marathon category, or you're just looking to do couch to 5K, I think the lessons of Eliud Kipchoge can really benefit all of us. So a little bit about the man himself. He was born in Kenya in 1984. Key headlines: he's an Olympic gold medalist. He was the world record holder for marathon. He unofficially ran a sub 2-hour marathon in Vienna, and the reason why it's unofficial is because of the controlled nature of the environment. There's some things in there that I'm not 100% au fait with, but it's something to do with the paces and the way the paces ran and all that. I think the road was laid specially. There's all these things that make it an unofficial thing, but even still, he still ran a sub 2-hour marathon. He's had 10 major marathon wins, and his average pace, I love this, his average pace for the sub 2-hour challenge in Vienna was 4 minutes 34. So I think he ran something like, don't quote me on this, but off the top of my head, it was something like 8 consecutive 14:35Ks. I mean, it's ridiculous pace. So what he's always the way he's always approached it, and what the message I get from Eliud Kipchoge have always been about what's possible when we have discipline, we believe in ourselves, and consistency, and we link those things together, which is something that I talk about a little bit, and I've always had of my own personal journey. So when I started losing weight all those years ago, I stumbled across the fact that you need to stick to things. You need to be consistent, whatever you're doing. When I sat, a lot of, unfortunately, the way a lot of people approach exercise is, in any exercise, is I'll do it when I've got time, or I'll do it when it's convenient. You have to be disciplined and you have to be consistent, and it's consistency with anything that you do. So you don't have to be a certain way. And I think he typifies that message. So one thing that I'm very big on when I speak to people is I like the mindset of a champion, if that makes sense. And I like the mindset of winners, and I like to tap into the mindset of winners. And he typifies that for me because he's not necessarily loud. He seems quite humble, if that makes sense. And his results match that. So he's not, larger than life. He's not arrogant with his results. He said only the disciplined ones in life are free. And I think his ethos really sings to me because he said things like, I think it was something along the lines of, no matter how good you are, you could always be a little bit faster. It was something like that. And I love that because one of the major things that I try and do when I help people with marathons and from my own personal journey is making it really simple and taking out all the complexity and taking out all the layers and taking out all the distractions and just keeping it as simple as you can and saying, right, if you want to run 26.2, 42 kilometers, you have to be in a position where you are ready both physically and mentally to do that. And secondly, if you want to get faster as something that you want to do, then you have to run faster and you have to learn how to understand your body at the pace in which you want to run at. And you only do that by discipline. You only do that by doing the work. You only do that by getting out and running. You don't achieve anything by reading. You don't achieve anything by getting the best tech or the best trainers or the best kit. Most of us as recreational runners, including myself, because I'm a recreational runner, we get better by doing the work and learning. And I think he typifies that. And he also said, probably his most famous quote is, "I believe no human is limited." Now, here's the thing. So when someone says something like that, our first thought is always, yes, but. And that's your ego talking. So your ego will say, yes, but I fill in the blank. Mine does that as well. So what I always take from that and where he can teach us a valuable lesson about all of us is that your philosophy should be, let's find out what my limits are. So not necessarily that I am unlimited, because human beings, we have got quote unquote physical limits. But what we do is our ego or negative programming from external sources tells us what our limits are versus us finding out. So many people told me that a sub-3 marathon for me wasn't possible. And that includes a lot of the tech that I currently use, even though I've done 2. So I think Strava and my Garmin both tell me that I'm 10 to 20 minutes slower than I am over marathon distance. But I didn't listen to that, and I didn't listen to people who said, oh, your half time's too slow, you're never going to do a sub-3 marathon. I said, I think I can do this, and I believed I can do this. And what you believe is possible, you will explore. Yeah, if you don't believe anything's possible, you won't even explore it. Now, you might explore something and still not get the result, but at least explore it. So the philosophy that Eliud Kipchoge has is, I think, beneficial for everybody. So he talks in a way that he makes running a lot about the mental game, about the calmness, the inner peace, the smiling, which I mentioned before. And I think that, for me, is the game to win. And that's why I wanted to talk specifically about him today, because we don't know what level he's going to compete at moving forwards. We don't know whether he's going to go back and do any more majors. And he, potentially at 41 now, he's arguably coming towards the end of his sort of elite level performance with more younger people coming into the marathon field at elite level. So, I wanted to really talk about it today because I think, for me, the mindset thing is the biggest thing. And I think if people accept that you need to understand yourself really, really well to run a marathon, particularly if it's your first one. And yes, you do need to look at your inner dialogue, your calmness, your inner peace, and also you need to enjoy the process. I think more people would do it, because I think that there's too many messages out there about this is brutal, this is going to hurt, you're not going to be able to walk for 3 days and all that. And I think with the wrong prep, absolutely. But I think with the right prep, both physically and mentally, I think it's a lot more possible than you believe it is. And I think it's there for everybody. And he for me typifies that, because he doesn't really talk about his times. He doesn't really talk about that side of it. He talks about giving back and what he wants people to believe about themselves in a running sense. So now, I think when you look at the basics, so for example, when we look at elite runners, what do elite runners do? Well, they're probably doing about 200-kilometer weeks, a ridiculous amount of miles. That's probably what, I don't know, it's a ridiculous amount of miles per week. And what he's always preached is simplicity. So he trains with a group in Kenya like he's still a rookie. There's no ego. It's just work. He's had the same coach for over 20 years. No chasing fads, just a system done brilliantly over time. Yeah. And the real key lessons we can all learn from this individual at any level are as follows. Greatness doesn't come from novelty. It comes from consistency and repetition. Okay. Success isn't about talent only. It's also about focus. And you don't need to be flashy. You just need to show up. And that is amazing. And if you look at the way he approaches it, the way he's always approached it, it doesn't look flashy. There's no novelty, but his execution is different level. His execution is the key. Yeah. Now, Eliud Kipchoge will go down in history as the greatest marathoner we've ever seen. Okay. Now, people might surpass him, but at the moment, for me, he's the greatest of all time. What makes him truly special is how much of his legacy we can apply to our own lives, even if we're not elites. So here are the things that I've taken from him that I want to pass on to you. So firstly, and I've said this before, control the controllables. Yeah. So make sure that you are firmly in control of what you can control and let go of what you're not in control of. And you are in control of your routine, you are in control of your effort, and you are in control about how you deal with the thoughts that go through your head. Train the mind like you train the body. Calmness isn't optional, it's a skill. So inner peace and calmness are essential. When I've achieved my big running targets, I've had an inner sense of calmness and control. And that can be taught, and it is important. Keep things simple. Again, we've talked about tech, we've talked about shoes, we've talked about kit. All that stuff's great. But when you're at mile 20, 21 of a marathon, you won't care what type of smartwatch you've got. You won't care about a majority of things. All you care about is you've done the work and you can believe in yourself. Yeah. The power of consistency, believe in yourself, believe in the small steps done daily, and let running be a statement of character, which is important. Be humble, be consistent, be present, be persistent, be all these things. Because I think it can be that for a lot of people. And I think when I do interviews on the podcast, as you may know, I always ask people the same question. How has it changed you? And I think if we can adopt the same principles that Eliud Kipchoge's got about humility and consistency, presence and giving back, I think we can all be better runners, and then use the medium and sport of running to make it a better world. Okay, so I don't think obviously he's never going to listen to this, but I just think for me, he's always been somebody that I focused on. I mean, not being an elite level runner, I'm always interested in the performance levels of elite level runners, but for him, he always stuck out to me just because of the way he conducted himself and the way he smiled and the way he did interviews and the way he was humble and all that sort of thing, and the way he preached consistency, which really sang to me. So, as a marathon runner myself and somebody that came to the sport relatively late, I came to it, in my mid-30s. He's been part of the reason that inspired me to keep going, if I'm honest, because of the way he approaches it. And if we can run with intention and run with gratitude, and you are willing to challenge the limits that you've set for yourself, which is important. Just notice you don't necessarily have to believe you're unlimited, but challenge any limits that you have set for yourself, self-imposed, then you can achieve greatness in your life that's comparable with anybody else. Okay? And just remember, the best message he teaches, keep showing up, keep doing the basics brilliantly, and you will achieve goals that can blow your mind, as I can attest to as well. So thank you, Eliud Kipchoge. And that is the end of episode number 70, a little tribute from me. So as always, don't forget, if it's the first time you're listening to this podcast, please do subscribe to it wherever you get your podcasts from. Drop me a review. That's really useful, particularly on Spotify, so a star rating on Spotify or Apple. Please share this podcast with your friends or leave a comment. That's also useful. Head on over to @12months2marathon on Instagram to follow me to get your daily free content and tips over there. And if you want to join my free, again, over running community for the over 35s, all you need to do is head on over to Instagram, go to my bio, and there's a link in there where you can join my free community where we can take you away from the noise of social media and we can keep you supported and accountable in that group. So thank you everybody for listening. I do appreciate it, and I'll speak to you all again very soon.